Welcome to this Automation World video podcast sponsored by Schneider Electric. In this podcast, we'll look at the impact of automation technologies on smart cities and how their evolution is offering lessons for the industrial world in terms of how they drive efficiency and reduce costs. I'm David Greenfield, Director of Content at Automation World, and joining me for this discussion is Tim Soul, Chief Architect for Industry Solutions at Schneider Electric. So Tim, smart city infrastructure has increasingly been at the forefront of automation news for the past several years now, based on their application of technologies that are common to industry. And since your job involves working with both smart cities and smart industries, what has stood out to you the most when it comes to smart technology applications in cities in particular?
It's interesting. Smart cities, you hear about the term smart city. How do I bring to the modern intelligent cities? You're seeing the same with smart airports, smart infrastructure. Well, there's a general move around urbanization and how do we bring efficiencies to your cities. Traditionally, they've been pretty isolated, your buildings. Energy management comes into that. Safety comes into it. Effective movement of people, understanding where they are from a safety point of view, but also the effective use of cost within inside the cities. So people are looking to see how do they deliver the right services to the population, e.g. escalators, water, fields, regions, but do that in a regular manner, in a cost-effective manner. That's causing a change in how they have to operate a city. A city now has to be not just running a park, isn't just a park anymore. It is actually monitored for moisture. If we've got a rainstorm coming, we don't need to irrigate it. How do we do that? That means we need to instrumentate up a city. We've got to make it smart. Smart means that we put sensors everywhere, which are intelligent. It's a part of the Internet of Things or smart cities where we start to bring up the information so smart decisions and actionable decisions can occur ahead of time.
Now, what about the isolation of systems in cities, as we've historically had in industry? And how is this being dealt with at the city infrastructure level?
Cities have been traditionally isolated in their various controls, building control systems for each building, each airport, each train station. We're now unifying all of those into a unified operational experience, a unified information model, and a unified event system so that I can actually see, or people can see, situations before they happen or in a lead up to that situation. So that's been key. We've seen it before with alarming systems unifying across, say, schools, across the city. We see it in 911 systems, but now we're seeing it in much bigger systems, which is every part of the city.
What automation technologies are smart city developers most interested in? And does it differ much across or between these cities?
Well, it's leading to a couple of pieces. Firstly, how do we go to smarter sensors, smarter control, which means we're putting things in, again, I'll go back to the parks. How can we put moisture measures inside the parks so we don't overwater them? We can control those water systems and sprinkler systems from a remote environment. And we've also bringing in weather. So now weather comes in and we predictive weather, because if we've got a storm this afternoon, do we need to actually irrigate this morning? No, because you're wet, you get it too wet. So that means I'm bringing 3 pieces of data in. But now, more importantly, I may have done, your parks have traditionally just been non-automated or non-instrumented. So that's the first one. The second one is the move towards how do we capture that data in context. E.g., I know it was Park A, not Park B. I know it was from Building 1. And the thing you're going to find is all of these buildings, all of these parks are different vendors. So you might have had vendor 1, building management system, building 2, management system, airport 1, different management system, different fire system. How do you bring all of those into one operational system? And what people are building is, again, we start to see, like in many geographically distributed challenges or opportunities in the world, operational centers. These large operational centers which have got all the facilities in one environment, awareness from end to end across the city, but also having a central place from which all of the experts in the city can work from. There's one point of information, one point of view, one point of alarms, one point of awareness, and then they can have their meetings to determine how do they deal with this situation. Maybe it's, and what they're trying to do. And we can then start to monitor better operational practices around shutting down water, shutting down elevators at night if there's no people there, going up and down places, escalators inside your cities, whatever. And lighting, how do you manage that so it reduces cost and impact to the environment? So you've got all of those coming into play at one time. But you cannot make decisions if you cannot get the data in a context and trusted manner. So the big thing is, how do you do that? And that's what is. So people are very much in this unified, how do you bring the data in and put it in context? And that will then lead on to the Internet of Things and the move towards potential technologies like cloud and the potential to bring that up there, plus also big data, where we can try to predict what's going to happen.
Now, you mentioned big data and the cloud specifically. How do you see these technologies coming into play for cities as compared to industry?
Probably because smart cities have been traditionally unautomated, that they've got the ability to jump the industrial world, which has been progressively going down a more automated world. They're going to jump straight to the Internet of Things and their smart devices, which I think is a huge opportunity and a huge step in gain. And it'll deliver more services to the community because they're more aware. And you can make I was in one city and the head of urbanization said to me, can you actually have a smart city without smart people? An interesting concept. And the thing is, how do you've got different people. You've got people are 10 years old, to 20 years old, 18. They've only just entered the city, so they don't know their way around. They're different experiences. We're not all the same, thank goodness. So the challenge with that is, why can't your mobile phone, your mobile device, come a part of your smart city so you come aware of the situations where you had and the conditions and request things? Again, if you want a service, you're going to ask for it. Well, that means we need an integrated city to be able to respond to that opportunity. And that's what some of the leading cities like Singapore, Barcelona and others are heading down that path.
And what are smart cities most interested in doing in terms of modernizing their operations? And by that I mean, where are they at today and where do they want to be tomorrow?
I think, to say where people are today is most cities are isolated systems. They're isolated buildings, isolated control systems, unautomated parks, unautomated systems. And they're isolated. So now what they want to do is, how do they capture that stuff, that information up and connect? So how do we connect people together? The opportunity now is with the likes of 4G and your internet and the move to 5G type broadband mechanisms coming into play. We've got the ability to gather data up without wires everywhere. We can make all of our sensors feed the data up. They can bring context with them. But ultimately, we want the city to also come aware. And what I mean by self-aware is your park. It should be aware of its own health. It should be able to shut down. That's the whole idea of smart, is it is aware that there's a storm coming. The park is aware of how moist it is. And it should be able to manage it within inside itself, not just from a centralized control environment. And that's the shift to moving the systems to being aware and smart, that they've got a bit of autonomy to actually do and manage things in the most effective manner. And you're only having the operational center run on exception, e.g. the exceptional case, maybe there's a big tide or something which is occurring in the city, which is an abnormal. So again, the move as we go up the automation layers and the 6 layers of automation, as we go up those automation layers, the top layer is no people are needed, which I don't believe can ever happen because we need that agility to change and the changing situations in cities, new various events. But if we're going to go to centralized operational systems, a city is a huge area, large amounts of data, large amounts of information, People can't deal with that in the operational centre. So the city must only run on exception. He only sees the situations which potentially need him to intervene, or that operational person to intervene, or his expert team. And he might have to dispatch somebody or do something or override. Otherwise, the control systems, or the park, the elevator, should automatically run itself. But it may be getting information about the weather from somewhere else, or the day's schedule of people coming into a place, or a plane coming in, or whatever. So all of that is suddenly moving to that. How do we manage data? How do we enable actionable decisions earlier, and awareness? And that's very different to what we have today. We don't have most cities, and there are exceptions like Barcelona, which have moved down this path in a very mature manner. There are others going down this path, and I think that's the exciting part, is as you go into these bigger cities, they've all got these smart initiatives. But a lot of them are starting off quite correctly, doing it in precincts or small suburbs or campuses, and then learning and building up the model, and then expanding it across the city. And that's where the opportunity is. So the infrastructure is huge. The opportunity is there to automate it at a very cost-effective manner, because now the smart devices are coming very, very cost-effective. They're intelligent, because even a Raspberry Pi today, you can program a whole lot of functionality on it, and it's $40 or $50. A lot of devices are coming down to a couple of dollars, and suddenly we can put some sort of maybe alarm detection in there. But we're still going to need to coordinate the whole city. We can't have all of these devices with their own alarm level and control being programmed by individual people. So now we enter what I consider the next challenge, which is how do we coordinate a city and these devices to be aligned to give you the outside goals. So that means standards management is going to re-enter the world.
Now, speaking of things like standards and the actual smart technology implementations you've witnessed in places like Barcelona, are there specific challenges you typically see when it comes to the real-world adoption of these technologies?
I think the challenges most cities like the likes of Barcelona, and we've been involved in Barcelona's evolution for a number of years, and it's continuing. It's a journey for most people. So firstly, these are not projects. These are evolutions, which might start off with a small area of experiment and trial, and then like in Barcelona, they did all the parks and central environment. Then they've moved on to the escalators and lighting and control, how you shut those down when they're not used, and the fountains, because Barcelona's got a lot of fountains. So how do you actually deal with water? Water management inside the city. Not water management from outside, but water management within my city to be effective, reduces cost and makes it safer. So how do you go about doing that? Delivering the right service and satisfaction to the customer being the human being. But when we go to the smart world of Internet of Things in our world is, how do we change the way in which people interact with the city? How do people deal with work? How do they go to work? How do they catch a bus? How do they come aware of the park? How do they do all that notification? So it's a change in behaviour. And that means we need to coordinate assets, which might be parks, instruments, pumps, various tanks, whatever. These assets, make them intelligent enough to work together, combining that with people and making them being able to work with people, these assets, and doing it in a consistent manner, doing it in the best practices so that they know how to go about it. You don't want to just give somebody the ability to, how do I walk around this park because it's too wet? You want to give them a guide to, you've told him it's too wet, and he has to figure it out. He's only just entered the city. Why can't you provide the best route for him to go around? Maybe there's a different way to do it. Where can I find this? So what we've got to do is enable people while enabling the assets to be more self-aware and linking together, because it's all about coordination of these together. And that's where we will need to program and build these standards to actually, so we can run these across the system and then manage it. So coordination of what we've done in the industrial world for years as automation, now we need to do it to these highly distributed, very old in many cases, cities with very many different vendors of hardware, compressor stations, whatever you want.
So how are those challenges you mentioned being addressed?
So one of the challenges we got in concluding and looking at this whole topic is when you look at a city, there's really two types of people in the city. There's the people who service the city, e.g. your maintenance people, your garbage people, the traffic lights, not traffic lights, the policemen or whatever. But they're doing a service to enable the city. How do they know what to do? How do they can get notified earlier that we've got a water breakage here, we need something here? How do they come enabled when they're anywhere within the city? And how do they come? They shouldn't have to go back to a centralized workstation. So how do we get them more efficient, more coordinated and aligned? And then you have the second group of people, which is the residents. The residents could be regular residents who know the city and new people who are coming in for, say, a conference. And you've got 10,000 people coming into a conference, and how do they find taxis? How do they find systems? How do they get transport? But more importantly, how do they also find, manage the way in which the lighting is? Because you'll end up maybe keeping the lighting on longer during that period of time, and they're going to do various pieces. So how do we service everybody along the way? So I think the opportunity, and we're working with the cities and the leading cities in the world and thought leaders in this world, and universities as well, because a lot of the universities are doing research, is how do we make these coordinations happen? How do we move, and it's a stepping stone. I can't emphasize enough, this is not a revolution. We start with airports in many cases, because that's a mass movement of people coming in and out. You see maybe train stations across the city. Then you end up moving to parks or various other things, depending on where they are and the utilities, but then coordinating them. They're not isolated. And that's where the real opportunity is, to learn, listen, and tune. The other one that they've also got is, how do you bring the IT and security into it? Because it's about safety of people, safety of your systems, addressing the environment, and lowering the energy and services costs, which the city does an imprint to the city. And that's where the opportunity is. You also got the introduction of renewable energy. That's starting to come into the places. So you're starting to see not power coming from a lot of other places and other environments. You've got that starting to happen. And how do you deal with that and bring that into place? Because it's all about lowering of costs, because you don't want to live in a city which has got a high cost. So how do you increase services while lowering cost and increase the satisfaction and comfort of living there?
Now, based on your experience, Tim, are there any special techniques that you've seen successfully applied to enable both smart cities and industries?
A lot of people ask me then, what are the techniques, or what are the leading techniques being used? And there's a lot of them. There's a couple of them. The first one we're starting to see is the move towards these operational platforms. You'll hear people talk about the city OS, or the city operational system. It's effectively an operational platform which goes across a city. It could be in the cloud, it could be on the plants, across the pieces, but they're coordinated across the different buildings. So the key thing here is the ability to capture data and control it back and make a central person aware, but allow that to happen. That means, so that platform's coming into play. The second one is the move to standards. Move to a standard, and a standard isn't one vendor of hardware. It's been able to capture a best practice. Maybe it's a control practice for how a sprinkler works, to how you shut down a system, or you manage an energy piece, but do it in a way where you can, because a lot of cities, it's very repetitive. You've got lots of the same thing over the whole city, and how do you build one way of doing something and distribute it to one site, one substation, and then to another substation, and then to another substation? And then how do you evolve that? So you're going to learn as that city goes on, because the move to smart cities is new. So it's a journey of learning about, how do I control this operational city? How do I make it happen? And how do we bring that knowledge in? So because again, knowledge is what we're trying to bring into the system, and therefore and allow the humans, the city people and the services people to actually work in collaboration and interact. So that's where the opportunity is. So the techniques are really Internet of Things, the cloud for data gathering, going to one platform of standards at the control and operational level, and the move towards making standards down and coordinating these smart devices through an enterprise standards platform, which can control different vendor equipment, whether it be a pump, a smart pump, to a valve over here, to a sprinkler system over here. They're all going to be now smart, and how do we put the right control or the right alarms in those so we can evolve them? Because you don't want to program every sprinkler in a city. You want to have one way of them controlling a best practice. You might have those sprinklers may have been implemented by different vendors. We need to put one sort of approach to controlling those and triggering the best operational practice. And we want to put it into, sprinkler 1, sprinkler 2, sprinkler 3. We want to manage that, and we want it to be able to evolve over time. That means standards. Standards management system, which is independent of the target device, is critical.
Well, thank you, Tim, and thank you for joining us for this video podcast. For more information, please visit the website shown here.